All right. Um, my name is Daphne Kirkpatrick. I am the Business and Communications Manager for the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation. I am so happy to be here as always. This is a very exciting topic, and thank you so much, Mark, for being here to talk to us about historic preservation photography. Um, could we go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm not seeing it yet. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Thank you. There was a bit of delay. So as always, I wanted to introduce the Florida Trust for anyone that is new and doesn't maybe know what we do. We are the statewide nonprofit for historic preservation in Florida. We came together in 1978 to save historic Florida Capitol and other historic treasures. Apologies for the phone. Okay. And our mission is to promote the preservation and inclusive sharing of the diverse architectural, historical, archaeological heritage of Florida. We have 4 areas of focus, which are advocacy, connecting preservationists across the state, education, of which lunch learn is part, and stewardship. And with that, I'll give the mic to Mark. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Mark Krancer. My business is Kran Photo. So that is my first name, Mark, backwards, and the first 4 letters of my last name. I wanted to be a little bit different. I didn't want to have capturing beautiful moments photography, through my lens photography, anything like that. I want people to actually think a little bit, and I get that quite a bit. Um, People asking, well, Kran. Yeah. Anyways, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. It's a great joy to share my love of photography with y'all. I have kind of broken this down to try to be as general as possible for those who might be interested in the technical aspects of photography, for those who are looking at how to connect this with your community, the historic preservation aspect of things, how to include photographers more. Um, so I kind of jump around a little bit, but I try to cover a lot of bases. So I hope this is helpful to you, no matter what your background is. And for those who are possibly learning more about historic preservation for the first time, welcome, and I hope my experience can really be helpful and beneficial to you as a photographer, creative, or whatever your specialty and passion is. So that being said, this is kind of a little preview for the Palms conference next month in Tallahassee. So we'll kind of give this a run through. Um, so my story with historic preservation, I feel it's best to just kind of tell that, and it's essentially my history with photography and preservation. I grew up in Texas, and I grew up in Houston. Not a lot of historic preservation where I was. There's a lot of urban sprawl. I could see what would be a good photo, but I never really applied myself until I moved to a historic district in Jacksonville, Florida. Um, so I found my passion of photography riding a bicycle to work, 7-minute bicycle commute, and I had to see sunrise, and I just started taking photos with my cell phone, and one thing kind of led to another, and my passion was just discovered that way, and that was about 10 years ago. So that being said, one day I was riding my bicycle, and I was going past what in Jacksonville is a pretty notorious building. It is the Annie Lytle School, or Public School number 4. Um, there's lots of local lore about, kids in the boiler tank with the janitor and all sorts of stuff. There was lots of graffiti there and all that. But one day I was riding my bicycle, and I saw a gentleman who had jumped the fence, to go photograph in there. He obviously had a camera bag and a camera in his hand. Um, I'm not quite that adventurous with trespassing in properties, so but I love just the look and feel of the Annie Lytle School, even in its decayed and needing of preservation existence and currently has. So as a budding creative, I reached out to the Annie Lytle Preservation Group, um, a small and sometimes funky group, but they were passionate about saving this building. So I worked with one of their people there to orchestrate what we called shovel and shoots. And this is a great way to get community actively engaged in preservation of some sort. So we basically what we would do is we would have a Facebook group, post on Facebook about, hey, we're going to have an event where you can donate a couple hours of your time. Um, and sorry, here's photos of Annie Lytle, the public school number 4. There's a photo of me with Patsy. She's quite a character. My wife and my 2 stepsons, pictured on the right, they joined us for these days of helping preserve or helping, at least ease the effects of time in the ways we could on public school number 4 and just getting to see it. Now, they still remember fondly those days of being in the school, and ask me about it quite a bit. So it obviously struck a chord with them, and I hope one day, who knows, maybe it can lead to a path in historic preservation. Hey, I would love that. Um, but so we have these Facebook groups, and I would post on Facebook, and within 24 hours they would be filled up. Like there would be that many people wanting to get in there and have legal access and see the building that we wouldn't have to share any more than that, but people were that interested in getting in there, donate a couple hours of their time and have an hour to shoot. So, here's kind of what they would do. They would give a shovel, donate 2 hours of your time to preservation, and shoot. So get to photograph the grounds for 1 hour afterwards. Um, some of these people in these photos, I still actively am engaged with as far as from a creative standpoint. A couple of these people are some pretty good friends. Um, and just to be able to share that and create a community around a space that everyone thought was just incredible. Now, your community might not have, an Annie Lytle per se with, the elaborate graffiti and all that. But it has places that resonate with people as far as whether architecturally, historically. There are places of value in your community that you can find, and if there's an opportunity to engage with the local community by having something like this, great. I'll tell you, just with this personal project, we did several shovel and shoots, and they filled up every time, no problem whatsoever. I mean, they signed waivers of liability and all that sort of thing. um, After a while, we kind of had some internal politics with the group, and we're no longer able to do it. But it was a great way to get engaged with the community and just create more community around a building. Um, so I, as a photographer, let me just say, even before I was a photographer, I loved history. So I was the guy growing up in Texas who would read my whole history book in school, even the chapters that weren't assigned reading. So that, I mean, it's a passion of mine to understand the history of where I am. Um, you know, it's not every day that you get to have such an opportunity to visually showcase things to the general public in some of these really cool historic buildings. But I've been blessed to have my fair share of legal access to a lot of these buildings in Jacksonville. So this on the slide here is a fascinating example of creating community and engaging the community in a different way through historic preservation. So I know the trust is familiar with Union Terminal Warehouse, but this, Columbia Ventures, the people who are developing this site, they held a really cool photo contest. So basically, what they did was they offered up the building while it's being restored. This is about a 100-year-old building built in the years after the Great Fire of Jacksonville. Um, and it's seen the ravages of time and all that. Well, they're repurposing it for multi-use residential, commercial, and all that. And they wanted to get photographers to have a photography contest in there. Now, they one thing about photography contests, if you're not really versed in it a lot of times photography contests can kind of be like, oh, you pay an entry fee of $35 to $100. You submit your photo and you might get critiqued on it or whatever, but chances are you're not really hearing anything. Now, free photo contests, you can submit your photos and you basically get down the line. If you win even some of these very prestigious photo contests, you might get a koozie. Okay, for winning first prize, congratulations. Wow, thank you. I mean, don't get me wrong, I am grateful for the opportunities, but like Columbia Ventures, when they had their photography contest, now they're the developers, they have a little money in their purse for things like this, but they actually took the time and put a little investment behind it by having a $2,000 first prize, and then the second prize was like $500, third prize was $100, something like that. They had it open to about 20 photographers, so they had two groups that came in, and you watch a safety video, you're wearing a hard hat, you sign a waiver, you're safe as you can be in a you know a, a redevelopment of a building. um, so we all got the tour of the building, escorted, and just shoot what we wanted to shoot, and it was so cool. I looked at it this way as a photographer. No matter what, even if I don't win, I'm winning by seeing this building and seeing this building I've been inspired by for years that I thought was so cool. I get to have an insider's look at how it is being renovated and transformed. I mean, so I looked at it as no matter what, I'm winning. um, and here are a few photos, like that's a sunroof they had in one of the rooms. By the way, I'm a photographer, even though I've done architectural books and all that. If I use the wrong term of a certain piece of architecture, please forgive me. um, so fortunately for me, I ended up winning with this shot here. And it's a reflection, it's a creative shot. They were really looking for a creative angle for their photos. The purpose of some of this photo contest, how Columbia Ventures could gain value out of it, was they have the right to use these in their marketing materials and such, but they also use them as a base for artists to come in at a later portion of this renovation and paint murals. I mean, so you're not only engaging a group of creatives as far as photographers to come in there and get to see this place, but now you're having mural artists come in, and you're really creating a sense of community around this building. um, I found that fascinating. And in the grand scheme of things, if you have a building that is a big building that needs a lot of renovation, and in the grand scheme of things, this photo contest is a small drop in the bucket for a developer to have, to just help create community and get people engaged. I share these photos on Facebook. Other people did, of course, as well. It brings a different sort of grassroots awareness to these things. People who might not be intimately involved with it otherwise. So I really love this photo contest. And in whatever way, shape, or form that you can implement something like this and get the broader community engaged, like I applaud that. A great example for the Florida Trust might be at some point in the future, the 11 to Save having a photo contest. I'm just throwing that out there, no pressure. Uh, so now I get blessed with getting into some of these buildings that are just amazing, full of history. Now I get to do it for different reasons. Now in late 2022, I was approached by the Jacksonville Historical Society to document the Ford assembly plant. And basically it is at that time a 99-year-old building, and it was going to be demolished, unfortunately. So a beautiful, beautiful building. And I was awarded this contract. They got it through the city. Like, basically they put it as a term before it could be demolished, that it had to be documented for historic preservation purposes. um and I applaud them for at least putting that through if the building could not be saved. So I worked with Ennis Davis, who I'm sure a lot of y'all know, and we spent a couple weeks going through this building and its surrounding buildings, and just seeing what all we could as far as just the creative aspects, historical purposes, what was still left from these assembly lines. This is the only place in Florida that Model Ts, or that Ford ever built a vehicle. Like, I mean, I guess at some point, very, very early on, they would ship the pieces to the dealerships, and the dealerships would assemble them. But once they figured out their process of manufacturing, they would just bring the railroad cars down here, and they would have this large floor to work on. And Albert Kahn, I believe, is the architect. He built these all over the country, and he used lots of windows, lots of natural light. He tried to keep as much floor room open as possible to maximize the space in which these vehicles could be assembled. You'll notice on the left-hand side here, there's a the left-hand side of this main photo, there's a metal structure at the top, and that is a restroom. So they even built the restrooms above this floor just to maximize their space. I love the reflection shots. This is a great reflection shot. Kind of how the shadows interplay with the building itself. But if you'll notice in the bottom right photo here, it's on a cloudy day. And I wanted to get both aspects there, so that on a cloudy day, you could retain more detail in the overall shot. So there's less of what is called a dynamic range. So your brights are not as bright. your darks are not as dark as far as the scene you're looking at. So it's a more even scene so that if you need to look at certain details, it may work better. There may not be as many shadows conflicting with whatever historical research purposes you may need to do in the future. Someone 100 years may need to do in the future. You have different options there. So, if you need to go photograph a building on a cloudy day, don't be afraid of it. I mean, if it's raining, sure, but don't be afraid of a couple clouds. So what is the story? Now here you can see the restroom up above there, and just kind of maximizing that space again. But what story are you trying to tell with your historic preservation? Some cases it might be strictly for like a master site file or something like that, where you're just trying to architecturally get as good of photos as you can straight on. But in these buildings, they also have incredible stories to tell visually, through other means there. Yeah, textures are a great example. So I have a cousin who's a art director in Hollywood. You've seen his work, you just don't know his name. Um, but he has a whole book of textures. So textures from all over different types of scenes: log cabins, stone cabins, modern materials, all that. So he has that as a reference. These are all textures from within the Ford plant, and I mean, I just love the stories these each tell. So collision of creativity. So I can't help but compare and contrast what Jacksonville lost, but this Camp North End in Charlotte, North Carolina saved. So they had the same exact plan as far as floor plan for the Ford manufacturing plant, and it was used in numerous other ways throughout the years, as far as industrial purposes and all that. But when it came time for this building to face, a renovation of sorts, it was reimagined and turned into a creative space. Now, this was Jacksonville's loss, but fortunately, Charlotte found a way to save their building, turned it into a creative hub. They did a really great job, in my opinion, with mixing modern with historic, and kind of some of that real rustic historic industrial feel, patina, we'll call it. So I just loved my time there. If you happen to be in Jacksonville and you can get your hands on a copy of the Arbus magazine this month, they did their arts and architecture um, uh, annual edition, and they did a whole write-up on both the old Ford plant and this one in Charlotte, the old Jacksonville one. They compare and contrast that, but I love that they've turned this into a creative space. You can see on the photo at the top right here, just that infusion of modern and historic, working well together to fit a modern need. Now the day I came there, it was an off time. I mean, I was there early in the morning, basically, and kind of just come in for just a couple hours. But I spoke with a couple local businesses there who say, especially on the weekends, they are just very packed, and I love to hear that. People are enjoying this space again. Um, so, you know, hey, if you have a space that you can compare and contrast as far as those who are celebrating the wins, hey, for your own sake, bring that to your community and see try to visualize what you could have. So placemaking Main Street, where history enriches our modern experience. it's a sense of feeling when you go into a downtown that has historic architecture that you're just not going to replicate, even with the best modern master planned communities, right? So I now this sign here was something that Newport Richey had just put up when I was coming there for a photo assignment with Main Street, and I just love being able to capture that. But hey, it sets that marker. Hey, here's where history starts for Newport Richey. Come join us. Now here's 31 Supper Club in Ormond Beach. Now, I love their use of lighting here, the Art Deco building. They have a really cool 1931 themed restaurant in there. I mean, just, jazz is playing. I loved so much. I went there for my birthday one year, but they're doing things really well as celebrating the history. Now, every community is going to have a different story to tell, but what is your story? That's something worth figuring out. Ormond Beach, they and Daytona, not that area, they have a good amount of Art Deco buildings, and I love to see when they're trying to tell that story a little bit more. Magic Beach Motel. So this was quite a win for preservationists, because this definitely was facing some challenges in Volano Beach for quite a while. But I was hired by a couple of actors to have photos with their T-Bird there. And they didn't have a space in mind necessarily, but I was like, hey, how about Magic Beach Motel? And the facade here, the neon lights, that's not historically, there. It was built in the 90s for like a TV show, I think. But it plays such a great character as far as what story you can tell. And I mean, like, looking at this, I mean, with the exception of that one car off a little bit there, you really get the feel of going back in time to a different, and they've preserved that. And I'm thankful to say that this will be around for the foreseeable future. Fingers crossed. But it helps set a sense of place as far as the rest of that community. So now modern buildings in that area are kind of following suit. Like this is a new Hyatt that was built there, and brand spanking new building. But hey, they are at least trying to replicate that look and feel for their main street, and I applaud them for doing that. Instead of just another thing you could see anywhere across the country. At least give it some character. So down in LaBelle, Florida, I really love, now I love murals. I love when I see murals in different districts. What I really loved about this honey building, now this is a historic honey building. Harold P. Curtis, I think, has had that honey business. It's been around for 60, 70 years, something like that. Oh, yep, it says right there, established 1954. There you go. So I stumbled upon this mural, and I love it because it is intertwining art, creativity, it is intertwining the history of the building, and it is so interactive. You can see the honeybees at the top right, and the honeycomb just dripping down into this little boy's bucket. The other little boy is playing with his almost kite of blossoms. It is fun. And what is really, really cool about this, in my opinion, is how they've planted the flowers at the bottom. So essentially, it looks like they're running through a flower field. Now, you can't do this with every single mural out there, obviously, but hey, what if you explore the creative options and try to make it a little more interactive. I got to see some of that in DeLand when I was on tour there, and I really enjoyed seeing what they were doing as well. So Matthew Tilley raises awareness of the struggle of the honeybee and people connecting for a common cause. And I think with this mural, he did a fantastic job at that, while also displaying the history of the building itself. What a great way to tell that story to someone who might just be a casual observer, to someone who didn't know that this was a historic honey building. I mean, you don't know what impact you're making on someone who's just passing by. So celebrating culture, to kind of illustrate this a little bit further. So I went on a tour over the last few months, of all the Florida Main Street communities throughout Florida. And I went to over 50 of them. And I got to see what was unique of each community and try to capture that as best as I could with my photographic ability. So Okeechobee, Florida was a great example of kind of how they were using art to celebrate their culture and their heritage. In this case, cowboy cracker culture. They had a large mural, or actually not mural, sculpture park here. To kind of simulate the range of what cattle would be driven on their in a field. What how the history of it is portrayed, bringing it to a new generation who might not have access to the cracker culture on a daily basis, but here they are, they can see it for themselves and get a feel of it. you know um, so I loved how they were kind of intermingling history with their current surroundings and bringing it for another generation here. By the way, so you might see, and well, you have seen in several of my photos so far, the lights. So like on the bottom right photo here, here's a building that it's shot at twilight and it has lights going in front of that. That is car trails, that is traffic going through or going in front of the building. And I use it as a creative way to help tell the story of that building a little bit more. So that is essentially a longer shutter speed. So I'm letting the camera open for a longer period of time. And over that time, that car might be passing by. And because the car is moving, all I'm seeing is the lights. Now, if that car is stopped at the traffic light and it's stopped there for a few seconds, well, I'll get a photo of that car right there at the light. But as long as it's moving, it will keep, as long as you have your shutter speed set correctly, you will just see the lights passing by. And I use that as a creative effect. I've loved that from the very beginning of my creative journey, and I love to share it. So tips for getting better photos. So use a tripod, especially like how we were mentioning right there with twilight or interiors. Uh, Now keep your camera level unless you're going for artistic expression, like you saw in some of those Ford plant photos, or yeah, the Ford plant photos, that I was angling up, and I do that to help tell a story. But if you're going strictly for telling the story of a building, I would suggest trying to keep your camera level. That way the walls aren't getting all skewed one way or the other. It helps tell the definition of that building. Seek out the best light for your subject if time allows. Photography can be a fine balance sometimes of trying to fit it in your schedule, trying to work with whatever weather you have going on. If you want to photograph in the summer in Florida, I suggest going early in the morning if you can, so you can avoid, those summer showers. But that might not be the best light. So if you have to take a photo and the lighting is not best, but you really need to get it for whatever reason, I would strongly suggest a technique called HDR. So that is high dynamic range. And essentially what that is doing is it is taking a photo of the darkest darks in your subject, and it is and then a middle range where most of the tones of your photo are, and then the brightest brights of your photo. And then you combine them later in Photoshop, Lightroom, something like that. Some of your cameras, your cell phones, they might even have an HDR function on them. Sometimes that's kind of a fake HDR on cell phones, but it can help with really getting those brights and those darks to kind of align with what you want to tell. You can go way overboard with that and it can look way overcooked. But just to give you an example, here's kind of HDR. This is a Florida theater, and this is several photos combined. So the brightest brights would be those lights around the stage. And then the darkest darks would be the darkness in those seats down there, and maybe then the little exit hallways off to the sides. So, trying to get the most data, because essentially your camera is recording data that you're sharing with it. That is important, and understanding what your brights are, what your darks are, and whatever scene you're looking at. So, don't be afraid of cloudy days, more details, less harsh shadows, and judge your distance to shoot based on the height of your subject. When I was working with Dr. Wayne Wood on photographing historic properties around Jacksonville for his book a couple years ago, he basically used a rule of thumb where you want to get twice as far from your subject as the height of your building. Now, especially if you're in a historic main street downtown, that's not always easy. There can be some tight streets there. But try your best with that. That will help you keep your level straight on your camera. And it will just help you get a better overall photo of the building you're trying to photograph. And go wide. Go wide. Like, if you're using a camera, like not your cell phone, and even your cell phone, hey, get that wide angle lens out and just see what you can get. Like, it can tell a whole lot about whatever scene you're in. I mean, this is inside of a church in Jacksonville, and it had this mid-century modern update, and it's just really telling that story by just going as wide as you can. Very rarely in the architectural photography I do am I bringing out a long telephoto lens. In some cases I do, but generally I'm going with a very wide lens. If you're looking at millimeters on a camera, I might suggest like a 14, 15 millimeter to 24 millimeter for full frame lenses, and there can be the equivalent with a crop sensor, but that's generally kind of the range for wide angle lenses I would talk about. Or if you're using your phone, and like the cool kids say these days, do a 0.5. Like, have you ever heard that term with selfies and all that? You can get your wide angle camera out on your phone and, kind of mimic that same sort of thing. Now, in some of these cases where you can't physically get, on the ground so far away from a building to tell its story, hey, explore a drone. Like, if you get that drone up in the air, you can you can back up accordingly. You can get away from a lot of distracting elements like power lines, street signs, stuff like that, and you can really focus on what you want to. Now that being said, you want to understand the airspace you're in. In Jacksonville, there's a lot of military bases. So, you can't legally fly in a lot of spaces without going through a lot of paperwork. I'm a Part 107 FAA certified pilot, and I do this commercially. So I understand the process, but I'll tell you, it can be a lot sometimes. You have to get FAA approval first, and then depending on what your airspace is, you have to go to the air traffic control of the military base and do a lot of paperwork that way. Call in the day you're doing it, call after you're done. It's just a lot. Now there are apps on your phone that can help you understand what airspace you're in. Like I know, like I did a event in Washington D.C. Last year, and at first I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll get my drone up, and then I was like, wait, no, hold on. I'm not even going to try in DC just because of all the restrictions there. Sometimes it can take up to 90 days for that paperwork to get through the approval process. So just a fair warning on that. If you want to go that route, understand your airspace. So, no matter what, as far as, hey, if that building is still standing, there can be new growth from old history. Celebrate those wins, understand what challenges may lay ahead for a future project, but celebrate the creativity you can have in that, and exploring new adaptive reuses for a historic property. Now, Annie Lytle is still very much in its struggling phase. It is looking for that right use for it. It is right along a highway. It is very loud. It is not conducive for like residential use necessarily, but hey, I would love to see it be used as, a creative hub, kind of like like that property in Charlotte I showed. But hey, it takes people with vision. It takes the right people with the financial backing, the plan, the resources. Ultimately, as a photographer, I feel it is my responsibility to just help try to raise awareness of these buildings and help however else I can in documenting that process. And when I got started in photography, like yes, I knew I loved history. Yes, I know I loved old buildings for the stories they tell, whether they're abandoned or renovated. Like there's that whole urbex core that just goes into abandoned stuff and takes photos, but I saw there was more potential for that. And it wasn't until I was at a Florida Trust conference and Melissa called me a fellow preservationist that I really understood the value in what I bring as a photographer. We get to travel in a lot of different circles, get to see different ideas and creativity and be inspired by that, and hopefully bring more awareness of that to others. So I hope through this presentation, you've had some new seeds sown as far as new potential growth you could have in whatever historic preservation struggles you may have. And thank you very much. We can now open that up for questions.
Thank you so much, Mark. This was really interesting, and the photos were very beautiful.
Thank you.
All right, I am going to share some slides myself. In the meantime, please feel free to write your questions in the chat, and we will address them as they come in.
And Daphne, can folks unmute as well and just ask a question if they feel inspired?
Yes, they
I
can
feel
do.
like Mark can handle that. I think if you would like to ask a question, you could just ask Mark.
Hopefully.
I think you can.
My photo skills are much better than my Zoom skills, but as long as I can hear you, I can answer a question.
So Daphne's got her slide she's pulling up. So please feel free to ask any questions if you have them. Mark is such a wonderful resource. Sharon, are you raising your hand? I think you might have to unmute.
Melissa, may I ask?
Oh yeah, Bill, yes, please.
Okay. Mark, first of all, thank you very much. I'm on the board of two historical societies, one in Florida in Venice area historical society, and also in my hometown of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh. And getting to your Annie Lytle public building, it just resonates so much with me because I was instrumental in garnering $1.3 million to renovate a 12,000 square foot building, which was built in 1905. It was a schoolhouse. And, you know, it was taken over by our historical society. The school district sold it to the historical society for $1, which sounds like a great deal, but it's taken $1.3 million to bring it up to snuff. And we actually use it as, it's called the Schoolhouse Arts and History Center. And it's now used as a venue for corporate and private events, graduation parties, birthday parties, baby bridal showers. And it's also a repository for the history of our community. So, you know, I would suggest to anybody on these, you know, saving these wonderful buildings is extremely important, and to think outside of the box what you could use them for. You know, go to your historical society, see if they need a space. That's the problem with what we have in Venice so far. We don't have a physical building to create a repository for the history of our community. But what you do is so instrumental, because that shovel and shoot was a great way to get people into the building, to engage the community. And you just never know when your next sort of idea is going to come once people physically get into the space. So kudos to you for doing that, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. You know, I know one of the people who I met at those shovel and shoots is a project manager for a large construction company. You know, so I mean, hey, you never know where these things go, but if a lesson can be learned, that's wonderful. By the way, I love Venice. I took, as part of that Main Street project, I shot a lot of Venice, and you know, y'all have a very thriving commercial district. So I mean, I guess that's a good thing that y'all don't have the space available. But you know, it has its challenges at the same time. A victim of your own success in a sense.
Yes.
Sharon, did you have a question? Yes.
Yes, I wanted to thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation. I love the photos with the water reflection. So you had to wait for the rain to get those reflections?
Well, that's right. So in the case of the photography competition, that puddle just happened to be there. And once I saw the puddle, like I knew that was my shot. Like I spent 10 minutes trying to really get the right composition I wanted. A key to that is getting low. So getting as low as you can to really help tell the story of that reflection. And the beam of light that was just coming in through the window there and creating that reflection there was just so cool, you know. And when I took that photo, I was like, you know what, that's going to be my favorite photo. And sure enough, it was. And I'm glad the judges thought that was a pretty cool photo too. But you know, the Ford plant, it had just rained there the night before. And, you know, rain can definitely have its challenges, but I was so glad to see those reflections, because I love those doors that were falling off, you know, down there. From an artistic standpoint, it made a really cool photo. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Christine, do you have a
You know,
question?
you can also replicate that quite a bit with just taking your cell phone, if you have your cell phone, and bringing it down to the water's level, getting as close as you can to the puddle. Doesn't even necessarily have to be a very big puddle. It just has to be strategically positioned, which is sometimes harder, to figure out. But with the right lighting and all that, it can create extraordinary images.
Thank you.
Christine, if you want to ask your question real quick, and then we've got some questions from the chat for you, Mark.
Sure.
Mark, thanks. I really love the presentation. The quick question that I have is, can you suggest any kind of like online course or something quick that if somebody just wants to improve their like iPhone photos would be something that would be quick and straightforward? I do a lot of photography for surveys, and my photos are just like, the point and shoot photo, capture it and keep it moving, but I'd like for them to be better. And then the other question was for Melissa. Melissa, can we get Mark to do a photography class, for an insider photography class with Mark Krancer? I would totally sign up for that.
That is a great idea. And he is going to be at Palms doing this and helping us out at Palms. But what a great kind of insider's tour idea. Photo camp with Mark.
I love the insider's tour. So I'm definitely, looking forward to what possibilities that might have. Great idea, Christine. Thank you. And, as far as online resources, I'm a self-taught photographer. I learned basically off Facebook, and some YouTube. So on Facebook, I really love a group called Digital Photography School. Now, it will have a lot of different subjects, a lot of different articles. They post regularly. There's good discussion in there. My biggest thing was when I had a few minutes of downtime and I would just read one of them, it would be so overwhelming to understand the different technical aspects they were talking about. My biggest thing was I would have to read it and then apply it in the field. If I just read it, I wouldn't retain that knowledge a few days later. And, I have to fumble through settings and all that stuff. There are quite a few things on there that are gauged specifically to phones. If you really want to get into it with cameras, you can set a phone on manual. That's a little bit more advanced. I don't honestly do that very often, but if you wanted to pursue that route with a phone, there's definitely options available. And after we get done here, I can send a link to that digital photography school if there's a option for that. And hey, it's a creative journey, and that's what I tell my students when I have actual photography academies. It is a creative journey. Don't be overwhelmed by this stuff as far as the technical aspects. Learn something, apply it in the field, and just keep on walking down that journey. Like, it's not anything you learn overnight. You're not born with it. Just like none of y'all might have got into your historic preservation roles just overnight. It came from a passion, wanting to understand things, and then applying that. I mean, it's wild. I have assistants who went to school for photography. And, I never went to school for photography, but I'm self-taught, so it's just interesting how that plays out sometimes. If you love what you do, you'll figure it out.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. A quick question from the comments we got for you is, how can you use your iPhone to get photos that are at the level of the photos you shared in the presentation, or could you suggest any cameras for a beginner? So cameras.
Great questions. So for the first part regarding the iPhone, I got my start with an iPhone. I got my start with an Android, but a cell phone. Cell phones have some advantages as far as the ease and flexibility of getting a composition right. They're a lot easier to manage than a big bulky camera. But they also do have some technical limits. Now, these phones are improving all the time, so those technical limits get a little bit better and a little bit better. That being said, if you want to stay specifically with the phone, then good lighting is much more essential. As far as to get the technical aspects of getting the shadows, the dynamic range, that sort of thing. So making sure your light is good, planning your stuff just a little bit more. Hey, a camera is just a tool in the toolbox. Wherever you point it is, and you tell it what to do, it's going to do. Now that being said, with the high dollar professional cameras, it is just a better tool to get more shots more of the time that are usable. My most famous photo, it was a National Geographic and, nominated for a Pulitzer and all this. It was taken with a $300 prosumer Nikon D7000 camera. It is not your big crazy camera, but ultimately knowing what to do with it. So if you really wanted to get into it, try to learn to shoot manual on your phone. If you want to get into some Twilight stuff on your phone, you can get a tripod for your phone and play around with it. If you can get your camera into manual mode, your phone into manual mode, hey, just go explore some of that. And if you want to look up something in that regard, Google exposure triangle and just start, going down that rabbit hole. And as far as a camera, if you wanted to get more into it, like I said, you don't need the greatest, most amazing thing. But if you get any of the, I'm a Nikon guy, so I'm going to say, go for a Nikon. But, if you go Nikon, Canon, Sony, any of those, you're in pretty good hands. So you get their basic level, or maybe just a couple steps above that as far as camera models go. And the biggest thing is just learning how to use it. Don't just set it in auto and think it will take every single photo great every single time.
Thank you, Mark. That was a wonderful answer. And then we have one more question, then we'll give Daphne a chance to do her slides. Because I know we only have 2 minutes, but a quick question from Amy in the chat. Do you have an opinion about film versus digital for preservation photography? Federal guidelines are still very thinly focused, I guess, on HABs kind of photography, but few have that equipment and skill set. So what do you use? And this I know is something you and I have talked about.
Oh yes, So I guess the closest thing for me as far as a HAB style shoot would have been the Ford plant, as far as just documenting everything I could. However, it was not strictly in the HAB's requirements regarding film, large format cameras. I personally wish I could get more HABs work. I think it would be fascinating, but I don't have a large format film camera or the technical know-how to apply that. Because I started with a cell phone and then worked my way onto digital cameras. I prefer digital. But if you're going for HABs, you have to do the large format stuff. The 4x5s and all that. And I mean, I get it from a quality perspective. Yeah, the resolution's superior to anything a digital camera is going to have for a long time. But for most purposes, I mean, the digital camera does just fine for me. I can print large, room size wallpapers and all that. Just as far as resolution goes, it works well. And I do a lot of different types of photography. So I don't just do historic preservation photography, even though I love it. I wish I could do it full time, but I do food photography, weddings, events, all that sort of stuff. So if I had more time to go through it and learn those aspects and master it, I definitely would.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Daphne's gonna bring us home here, but thank you all for being here for our lunch and learn today. I really appreciate it, and thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Thanks for this opportunity. It's been
You.
awesome.
Really wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you again, everyone. If you would like to turn on your camera so that we can take a quick picture before the lunch and learn is over, that would be great. And while you do that, I just wanted to remind you that there are many ways you can stay involved with Florida Trust. Obviously, you're attending the lunch and learn. Thank you so much for being here. As always, this is going to be uploaded on YouTube. But there are so many other ways you can connect with us. You can, of course, become a member. You can become a volunteer. But if you'd like a more hands-off approach, you can just join our mailing list. You can submit nominations for a site that you think should be in the 11 to save in your area. You can just stay up to date with just following our social media, and you can of course get merch. I really love the t-shirts. I think everybody knows this by now, but I'll let you decide on that. And just a last reminder, our annual conference that we co-host with Florida Main Street is taking place next month, July 10 to 13 here in Tallahassee, which is, by the way, celebrating its bicentennial as Florida's capital. So we would love to see you here. If you haven't signed up, you still have a chance to do that until June 28th. And again, thank you all for being here, and thank you so much, Mark, for all the great insights and the beautiful.
All right. I'm sorry. I'm going to take a picture now. So Mark, I'm assuming I'm going to do it with my cell phone. That's the best way.
I think so.
All right. I'm going to do it. I did a screenshot too. So we'll have a couple different options. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You.